So, hi everyone. My name is Scott Lyons. I am the host of the Mind Body Therapy Summit and the founder of the Embody Lab. And we are so happy to have you and so happy to have Dr. Dick Schwartz. I'm such a big fan and so excited to have you on this event. Um, not only of you, but of your work as well has been so paramount in our field of psychotherapy and psychology, and so just on behalf of all of us, thank you
Welcome.
for your contributions. All right, you know, it doesn't mention any of your books, so I'll just afterwards I'll have you name. Is there 3 or 4? How many have you written?
Lots of them, yeah.
Would you say you lost count?
Well, there are lots of them, yeah.
There's a lot of them. Yeah. All right, we'll
Yeah,
put those on as
yeah.
well.
I can tell you the ones that probably would be most relevant. And
Okay.
there's a new one coming out with Sounds True in July. So,
Oh, amazing.
yeah.
Okay, great. We'll definitely go through those as well. The Dr. Dick Schwartz began his career as a family therapist and as an academic at the University of Illinois Chicago. There, he discovered that family therapy alone did not achieve full symptom relief, and in asking patients why, he learned that they were plagued by what they called parts. These patients became his teachers as they described how their parts formed networks of inner relationships that resembled the families that he had been working with. He also found as they focused on and thereby separated from their parts, they would shift into a state characterized by qualities like curiosity, calm, confidence, and compassion. He called that inner essence the self and was amazed to find that even in severely diagnosed and traumatized patients. From these explorations, the internal family systems IFS model was born in the early 1980s. In 2013, Dr. Schwartz left the Chicago area, now lives in Brookline, Massachusetts, where he's on the faculty of the Department of Psychiatry at Harvard Medical School. Dr. Dick Schwartz, thank you so much for being here. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you for this beautiful session.
Thank you, Scott. And you have such a soothing presence that all my parts have calmed down. So it's really
Oh,
helpful. And I'm honored to be included. I appreciate your interest in IFS. And uh, I caught some of Fran's presentation yesterday, and she did a great job presenting what Susan McConnell has done to take IFS more in the somatic world. And um, I'm going to be elaborating a little bit on that and offering some different exercises. And if we have time at the end, I'll show maybe 20 minutes of video. So we'll see if we can save time for that. Uh, so a number of you don't know much about IFS, so I'm going to introduce it briefly, and then we'll get experiential. So, as Scott was saying, I learned this from my clients. I didn't have a clue about parts when I started working with some of these clients who started talking about their parts. And I was at the time working with a group of bulimic kids in an outcome study, and uh, our family therapy approach was failing. So, out of frustration, I began asking why, and they started talking about this critic keeps attacking me inside, and that brings up a part that makes me feel worthless and empty and alone and young. And then that brings in the binge, who takes me out and makes me an unfeeling eating machine. But then the critic comes back. And as they talked about this, it sounded familiar because I'd been studying these kinds of patterns in families. And they were talking about these, what they called parts, as if they had a lot of autonomy and that they had these complex relationships with each other. And so I was intrigued after I got over being scared because I thought maybe these kids are sicker than I thought. Maybe they have multiple personality disorder. But then I noticed I've got them too. And many of mine are as polarized as theirs. And then I just got interested and started to experiment and initially made the mistake of assuming the parts were the way they seem, which is pretty much the mistake that everybody has made in the psychotherapy world and in our culture. And so the critic is a bundle of critical parental energy and voice, and the binge is an out of control impulse. And if you think of them that way, you're going to fight with them or you're going to try and control them, which generally speaking just makes them get more extreme. So after I got hip to that, that approach was making it worse. I started getting curious and started asking clients to ask the parts why they're doing what they're doing. And that changed everything. Just that shift from trying to control to being open and to listen to the parts. I started to learn that they aren't what they seemed, that they're forced into these roles that can be destructive, but they don't like doing what they're doing. But they feel compelled to because they protect other very vulnerable parts, and that they're frozen in time, that they're sort of stuck in these trauma scenes in the past, and they believe you're still 5 years old, and they believe that they still have to run your life. And as I got that, again, just from being curious and asking the kinds of questions I'm going to have you ask your parts today, I shifted again, not just being curious now, but I have a kind of appreciation for the heroic role these parts had played, at least when they were young. A lot of these parts in those early traumas needed to be extreme. They needed to get the person out of their body. They needed to do all the things that they continue to do. So I could extend that appreciation for the heroic role they played in the client's life, and also a lot of compassion, because again, they really didn't like having to do what they did. And the parts, as they get this, that you appreciate them and care about them, start to melt, and they'll start to relate differently inside, and again keep showing more of their, what we call their secret history of how they got into these roles. And as they do that, it's possible to go into those scenes in the past in a process that we might experience a little bit, and take the often child parts that are still frozen back there out of those scenes, and then help them unburden, help them release what I call their burdens, which is actually an important concept in this work and in embodiment in general, I think. The idea that traumas and attachment injuries or bad parenting inject into us extreme beliefs and emotions that attach to our parts and then drive the way they operate thereafter, almost like a virus, like the coronavirus. And it's possible to help parts unburden, which means releasing these extreme beliefs and emotions, at which point it's almost like a curse has been lifted, and they'll immediately transform into their naturally valuable states. Because my basic assumption, and again, this is a bit radical in the psychotherapy field and in our culture, is that there aren't any bad parts, that all these parts, it's the nature of the mind to have them. They're there for good reason. We come into the world with them. They help us. They have different value, different talents and resources for us. And if they're not burdened, if they're not stuck in the past, if they're not in their extreme role, they're just wonderful companions as we go through life. But as I was saying earlier, trauma and various kinds of other injuries force them out of their naturally valuable roles into roles that can be destructive, maybe were needed when you were a child, but now get in your way. And so some of it is just helping them know you're not 5 years old anymore, and you can handle a lot more than you could back then. And that's a shock to many parts. But it's also learning about what they protect, getting permission to go to that and healing that, and coming back and letting them see they no longer have to do the role they're in, and helping them transform. So yeah, and as I was doing all that, I learned, I decided, I'm a systems thinker. I was trying to see what kind of a map I could construct of the things I was learning about these parts. And the very simple map that emerged from all that is between the distinction between parts that before they were hurt were these vulnerable inner children who were, before they're hurt, playful and loving and open and creative and delightful that we love to be with. But after they get hurt, after they get burdened with these beliefs about how dangerous the world is, or how dangerous men are, or how bad you are as a person, as they take in those burdens, now they interfere. Now we don't want to be around them. Now we try to lock them up inside in inner basements or caves or abysses and try to stay away from all that, because now they have the power to overwhelm us and take us back into those trauma scenes and make us feel as bad as we did back then. So, and we don't realize that we think we're just moving on from the memory, sensations, emotions, and beliefs from the trauma, not realizing we're actually locking all this up, all this, all of our juice, really, all these great qualities that now is just burdened. So those we call exiles. And when you have a lot of exiles, you feel a lot more delicate. The world becomes more dangerous. So you need protectors. So other parts are forced out of their naturally valuable roles to try and control the world so you never get triggered. And they might try to control your relationships so that you never have anybody get close enough to hurt your exiles. Or they might control your appearance. And that's a big part of embodiment and disembodiment, is all this worry about your appearance and the critics that attack you around your appearance. Or they might try to control your achievement, how much you achieve, so that you have accolades to counter the worthlessness. Or they might try to keep you out of your body and keep you in your head, so you're just thinking all the time. You don't feel the rest of your body because it's dangerous to let you feel anything, for fear that then these exiles will get triggered and come out or dissociate you entirely. There are parts that have that power, keep you just a little bit out of your body all the time. So those we call protectors, manager protectors, because they're trying to manage everything and control everything. Doesn't always work. World has a way of breaking through those defenses, triggering your exiles, at which point it's a big explosion of flames of raw emotion that do overwhelm you and that make it so you can't function a lot of the time, and that you are pulled back into those trauma scenes. And so that's dreadful. So to the rescue, there's another set of parts that immediately go into action to take you away, to either get you out of your body enough that you don't feel the exile's feelings anymore, or to douse them with some substance or get you higher than the pain until it's all subsided. And those we call firefighters, because they're trying to fight the fire of these exiles' emotions. So it's the simple map: exiles, and then two classes of protector, manager, and firefighter. And again, just to reiterate, none of them are in their naturally valuable states. All of them, when released from these roles, become totally different parts that are very, very helpful in your life. So that's the little map. There's one big piece of IFS I've left out so far, and that is that as I was trying to get my clients to relate differently once I got hip to the fact they're not what they seem and they need to be listened to, I would try to have these inner dialogues. I'm a family therapist, so I was just bringing family therapy technique in this inner world and try to have my teenage bulimic client talk to her critic and listen to it rather than fight it like she had been. And it's going okay, and then suddenly she's furious with the critic. And I, as a family therapist, remember in family sessions, you have two people talking to each other, and suddenly one is angry at the other, and you look around the room and you notice somebody's siding covertly with her against the mother, maybe. And you, as a family therapist, get that person to move out of the line of vision of the person so they're not so influenced. And things settle down and they have a decent conversation. started thinking, maybe the same thing's happening in this inner system. Maybe as I'm trying to have two parts talk to each other, a third has interfered and is making the first one angry at the other. So I began asking clients to find the one who hates the critic, for example, and just ask it to relax in there, to stay out of this, just stop interfering. And to my amazement, clients could do that. And when they did, often they would shift spontaneously into a state in which the conversation would go well. Because suddenly, instead of hating the critic, they were curious about it, and they felt calm relative to it and confident. And they also sometimes spontaneously had a kind of compassion for it and could convey that to the part that had been their big enemy forever. And as I would try this same kind of separate, step back process, relax with all these interfering parts, with other clients, it was like the same person would pop out with the same qualities of calm and curiosity and confidence and compassion, and also a kind of clarity about the part, and the vision would change of the part, and also courage to do a lot of things they were terrified to do in the inner world, and creativity in terms of how they could relate to the part, and a sense of being wanting to connect to it, so connectedness. And those are what we call the 8 C's of self-leadership: calm, curious, confident, compassion, clarity, courage, creativity, and connectedness. And it turns out that that person who, when I would ask clients, now what part of you is that? They'd say, that's not a part like these others. That's me, or that's myself. So I came to call that the self with a capital S. And it turns out now, 40 years later, thousands of clients later, thousands of people doing this all over the world, we can safely say that that self is in everybody. That person with all those same qualities is our essence, and is just beneath the surface of these parts, such that when they open space, it emerges spontaneously and can't be damaged. I've worked with people with horrible, horrible childhoods, and it was not damaged magically, almost, and knows how to heal. When you access self in an inner system, people start spontaneously relating to their parts in a healing way. When you access self in an outer system, like I'm still a family therapist, I'm still a couples therapist, we're bringing this also to corporations and to conflicts between countries. When people access self, they relate in a healing way in the external world too. So self and this way of accessing it so quickly, even in people with horrible histories, is the big discovery of IFS, and is a big deal. And what I'm calling self can be more or less embodied. So uh, for me, self is actually kind of more like a field that's around us and can enter us. And when it enters us, self knows how to lead inside and to lead in the outside world. And we'll do that. But trauma has the impact of disembodying, at least to some degree, yourself, so that it has less ability to lead inside and has less ability to help your parts. And people with a lot of trauma, as you've heard reports of, their self is out of their body and they watch themselves get hurt. And it's very scary for parts to let their self back into their body. So embodiment in that sense is a big deal. And uh, yeah, and when self can't lead because it is more embodied, disembodied, then just like in a family where the parents are not there much, the parts get more extreme and they start to take over more and more. And that becomes sort of negative, a vicious cycle, because when self is embodied and parts feel the safety of that person being with them, they all start to calm down a great deal more. Uh, so, and also, just speaking generally about this relationship between the body and the parts, how you treat your body and how much you like your body will also have an impact on how extreme your parts get. So your diet and how much you exercise and how much sleep you get, all of that ties into how embodied yourself can be and how much your parts get extreme. And that also can become a vicious circle, because when your parts get extreme and you're not embodied, then they want you to do things that aren't good for your body. So it's yeah, it's all a cycle like that. Uh, okay, and one of my big interests has been bringing IFS to physical symptoms, to medical symptoms. And our big outcome study was with rheumatoid arthritis. We did that at Brigham and Women's Hospital here in Boston. And we had 30 RA patients get 6 months of IFS as a control, compared to a control group that got an educational control condition, and found that the 30 who got the IFS had very significant changes in the number of joints, in the level of pain in their joints as measured by blinded physicians, and also in their level of depression and anxiety and so on. And in examining what we did to arrive at that, a lot of it was just, these were by and large Irish Catholic mothers who, because it's Boston, and had these massive caretaking parts that didn't let them take care of themselves, just took care of everybody else. And as we had them focus on the pain and get curious about it and ask questions of it, the parts using the pain started to respond, and would respond about how much they hated the caretaking because it didn't allow them any space. And they were going to cripple the client so they couldn't keep doing that, punish them, or it was just their way of trying to get somebody to listen to them. And as we worked all that out, kind of time sharing more, and we got the caretaking part to not dominate so much and give more access to some of these other parts, they started healing. And some of them went into complete remission. But the results were very significant, as published in the Journal of Rheumatology. So that got me very interested in the body and how symptoms manifest. And so I've done many other kinds of physical symptoms with the model subsequently. If we do have time, I'll show you an example with extreme pain. And so my take is that we're all born with some genetic predispositions for medical symptoms. So I have one for migraine headaches and one for asthma. And I had severe asthma as a kid, had migraine headaches on and off through much of my adolescence and early adulthood. And then I did some work and got rid of it. I don't get them anymore. I still get the aura occasionally. But we all have these genetic predispositions, and our parts know about them. And if you saw the movie Inside Out, you know that parts have a little kind of control panel in front of them, and they can push buttons and pull levers and they can affect these genetic predisposed diseases to manifest. And that's not always the case. So if I was in a dusty room or slept on a dusty bed, which has happened recently, I'll get an asthma attack and it has nothing to do with my parts. I might focus on the asthma and get curious, and I'm not getting anything because it's just because there's so much dust. But if a part wants to take me out, it can push the migraine button and I won't be able to function. Again, it doesn't happen anymore, but it used to. So that's a very interesting relationship between parts and the body. And parts that you exile, parts that you don't listen to, have very limited ways of getting your attention or punishing you. And that's one of those ways. There are others, but that's a very potent one. And so one of the big problems I hope to change is that medicine is very oriented toward killing the messenger rather than listening to the message. And by killing the messenger, I mean giving you medication to drown out the message or to make it feel better. And so, uh, yeah, so anyway, that's my intro both to the model itself and also to the way the body works with the model. And so from here, I thought I'd do some exercises. And then, as I said, if we have time, show some video. Uh, should I take questions now, Scott, or should I just keep plowing ahead?
Whatever your heart desires. I saw one or two questions, but
Yeah,
whatever
maybe
feels good to you.
a few questions because I just blasted through it usually takes me an hour and a half. I did in about 10 minutes.
There was a question, when are parts created? Is it after core wounding or trauma that's creates them or before?
Yeah, so that's another mistake the field has made is
Mm.
so, some models that do work with parts believe they were created by the trauma, and then healing means them disappearing. And that's the DID world believes that, and so on. My take is it's the nature of the mind to have parts, so you come into the world with them, either manifest or dormant. So the manifest ones, infant researchers talk about, like Barry Brazelton will talk about 5 discrete states that infants kind of rotate through. So maybe those are the ones that are manifest when you're born, and then the others are dormant until those of you who have kids will remember one evening when you put to bed your 2-year-old who was really compliant up till then, and then you wake up and overnight this little part came in that makes them say no to everything. So it's sort of like that. So if you're in a healthy environment, your parts will come forward on time in their naturally valuable roles. But again, traumas have really screw all that up. So this is parts are great. They're little sacred beings that are deserving of love and attention. And when they heal, they don't disappear. They transform into their naturally valuable states. It's a very different paradigm.
Thank you. Were there more questions if you want to write them in? There was a question around DID, which we may need to define for people, but does IFS also work well with DID patients?
DID used to be called multiple personality disorder, so probably everybody knows what that is. And yeah, we do a lot of what we call direct access, where I'm talking directly to the parts and getting to know them, and they're connecting and attaching to me as sort of the self to the system until they trust enough to open space and let the client self come out. And done it many, many times with different DID clients. And it's the same self that'll pop out and start to take over the leadership from me that we find in not so abused people. So it's all parallel.
Hmm.
DID is just one end of a spectrum of what we all are, is the point I'm making.
Um, I'm just sifting through quite a few questions. Oh, there's an interesting question about how IFS might complement emerging psychedelic assisted therapies, which
That's
I,
that's a big, big focus of mine now. I don't. Well, I'll give you something brief. So
yeah.
the all the MDMA studies, most of them are spearheaded by a guy named Michael Mithofer, who is an IFS therapist, and that has been tremendously validating to me because when people take the MDMA, they access a huge amount of self. It's like their protectors, for some reason, immediately relax, and they're just in pure self almost. And that invites lots of their parts to come forward for healing. And so he kept track in one study, especially people who got the higher doses of MDMA, over 75% spontaneously started doing IFS because their parts would show up and the therapists weren't allowed to, do any special kind of therapy other than be present. But they just started to know how to relate to their parts in a healing way, which again just validated that I stumbled onto something that people just know how to do when they access enough self. And I could go on about other of the psychedelic medicines and their impact, but I don't have time.
I think there's something interesting in that, Dick, about saying that, a lot of the psychedelic medications, which have a very long history, actually, maybe not in Western medicine, but long history. A lot of these indigenous therapies um, actually uh, provided access into a lot of these sort of structured systems that we now have more in Western psychotherapy or in mind body
Yeah,
therapy.
I'm actually currently reading a book I'll hold up that gives that whole history. It's called The Immortality Key,
Yeah.
and it, implies that many of the spiritual leaders were doing some kind of psychedelic, including
Mhm.
Jesus. I know that might be heretical to some people, but anyway, let's not get on. Let's not go on.
How many more questions would you like before
Maybe one.
one more? Okay. Um, so there's an interesting question about how do parts and self tend to show up in the body? How can they be distinguished?
Yeah, that's some of what we're going to play with in the next few exercises.
Great. Do you want to take that as the last question, or do you want to?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, that's a good transition.
Yeah, it's easier if people can experience it. They
Yeah.
get it a lot more than just hearing me talk about it. Okay. Um, so there are a variety of exercises I thought to use, and I think I'll start with this one because it's an embodiment conference. So just take a second and get comfortable. And we're gonna, I'm gonna invite you to scan your body and your mind for what I'm calling protective parts of you. So just take a second and notice anything that doesn't feel quite like you, anything in the way of a tension or a hardness or pressure or some kind of critical thought or impulse that doesn't feel like you. I'm not inviting you at this point to go to these very vulnerable places that don't feel quite like you, that we call exiles, because we try to keep it safe by helping you focus first on these protective parts. One way to do it is just to focus exclusively on your heart and notice if there are walls around it, or if it feels tough in places or congested, or and when you find something like that, that it's what we call a trailhead, the head of a trail that you can follow the trail to find a part, then maybe just raise your hand so I get a sense of where we are. If you have a target sensation or thought pattern or that you think might be a protective part, raise your hand. Okay, all right. You can put your hands down. All right, so yeah, focus on that in your body. Find it in your body. And as you focus on it, I'm going to ask you a kind of odd question, which is, how do you feel toward this sensation or this thought pattern? In other words, how do you feel toward this part of you that's doing this to you? And it would make sense if you don't like it, you want to get rid of it, or even that you're afraid of it. All of that makes sense. And if that's true, I'm going to invite you to ask the parts of you that have those feelings toward it to just give you a little space in there and relax a little bit so you can get to know it and get to know more about why it's manifesting this way in your body or your mind. And just see if that's possible. See if those other parts will relax enough that you feel kind of open-minded about this target part. And if they won't, that's okay. You can just work with them about their fear about letting you open your mind and interact with this part. You can just spend the whole exercise doing that. What are they afraid would happen if they did separate from you? But if they will let you feel at least curious about this target part, then go ahead and ask what it wants you to know. Just direct that question to that place in your body. And don't think of the answer. Just wait for an answer to come from that place. Just this very open-ended question. What does it want you to know? Don't think and wait for the answer to come. And a follow-up question would be, what's it afraid would happen if it didn't do this inside your body or your mind? And again, just wait for the answer. What's it afraid would happen if it didn't do this job. If it answered that question, it's likely you learned about what it's trying to protect or to keep you away from. And if that's true, see if you can extend some appreciation to it for at least trying to keep you safe and protect you, and see how it reacts to that appreciation. And then ask it this question: if you could heal or change what it protects so it was freed up and didn't have to do this protective job, what might it like to do instead inside of you? I'll do that one again. If you could heal or change what it protects so it was freed up, it was liberated, this job wasn't needed anymore, what might it like to do instead inside of you? Then this might seem like an odd question, but ask the part how old it thinks you are. And again, just wait for the answer, don't think. How old does it think you are? And if it has it wrong, then go ahead and update it and see if it can believe you, see how it reacts. Then the last question is, going forward, what does this part need from you? And when all that feels complete, then thank your parts for whatever they let you do with this. and begin to shift your focus back outside. And if it helps, you can take some deep breaths to do that. So, Scott, I think I'd love to hear just a couple reports on what this was like, if anybody's willing to describe it. So, if you are, and I'd love to hear directly rather than read the chat.
Okay.
So, if you are, raise your hand, put your hand up in the thing.
It's Levi. Thank you for coming.
Levi, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Happens all the time now. I've been hearing a lot of screaming from a part who is giving me suicidal thoughts, and so I've found him or it, and I asked him the questions and got as many responses as I could. I asked him why, and he said that it's because life is meaningless and none of the other parts are getting what they need. And we're going to suffer this trauma for the rest of our lives. And said if it doesn't do this job, we're going to suffer for decades and then we'll die anyway.
So, Levi, did you follow up with if you could heal the parts that suffer so much?
Trying.
Did you get an answer to that question?
He said he wants to sleep and he knows how old I am. And when I asked him the next question, he said that he wants me to accept life's meaninglessness and to live it anyway and to get the rest of my parts what they need, or I won't be able to stop.
Okay, and is it clear what he thinks your parts need?
There's too many.
There's what?
It's too much. There's too many.
Yeah, well, that's a part talking right there. So, yeah, if I had more time, I could help you with it more, but
I'm
um,
sorry.
not a bit. No, I'm glad you're encouraged to speak it. Lots and lots of experience with these suicidal parts, and they need more access to yourself. And right now, I can see that there are exiles that are obscuring that. So, do you have somebody to work with?
I I've been in therapy for 2 years and have a new one recently. She's not trained in IFS, but she's in an IFS circle, uh, and she uses it in her own therapy. Um, I've only seen her 3 times.
Okay, that's great because it's very doable once you can help the part who feels so overwhelmed by all this. Step back, access more self, then you can start healing your exiles, which will really free up this suicidal protector. In the meantime, you know, this is a great beginning of a compassionate dialogue with it. How does that feel? All that.
I only heard about IFS a few months ago when I found an exile without realizing it, and it overwhelmed me. I learned about it. I read your book, or one of them. I was really excited, and now I'm mostly afraid.
And that's very common also. And, you know, first parts to work with are those scared parts so they don't take over and they let you do more.
That's most of them.
Yeah, yeah, you know, there's lots of work to do, but it's all doable. So, yeah, I'm glad you got a new therapist.
You too.
All right, thanks for being so open, Levi.
Thank you.
So, Nicole?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Thank you for taking us through this exercise. I've been a therapist for several years. I'm walked on this earth for quite a long time, and it was interesting to see how this talk came at a time where I was battling with a protector or manager, and I could put a name on it very quickly. I've been so angry, and I just hated the way I've been manifesting it in a certain situation. And when you asked the question what it was protecting, I realized that it was protecting the girl who's always been different and who's been striving for a sense of justice all her life. And I couldn't really put an age on it. I think it was about 30 years old when I started really realizing that I was different than many people because of my background, where I was raised and moving from different cultures. And I've developed this very strong sense of, you know, things have to be right and they should be this way. And it was just amazing to see how that part was saying, I want to exist. I just, it's okay. You don't need to be scared to be, you know, different. You don't need to be ashamed of that. And I'm going to be confronted to the situation tomorrow again. So I hope my parts will be reconciled.
also, thank you very much, Nicole. It's great. Um, I see a number of other hands, and I apologize because if we're going to do the, Ardeen, I think you raised your hand first, so I'll go with you, and then we'll stop. But we can't hear you.
Okay, sorry. Okay. Hi. Love your work. Saw you with Alanis Morissette. Was kind of a life-changing thing to see that, you know, at a different conference. And so I guess it was a very interesting exercise. And the sensation I felt was clenched rage. And I wanted it to go away, take a chill pill. And I realized that when I told it that, you know, it's okay, we can do this together, whatever. And it did, you know, the other parts let me talk to it. It said, no way. It was really, really mad and like mad dog rage. And I was like, what is this about? And it's about worthlessness, right? So it was protecting me from that, and that the world, in fact, is a really horrible place in a lot of ways. And therefore, it wasn't going to back off. It's like, you can't handle the truth, you know? And so when I told it, you know, I'm not 5 anymore, which is how old it thought I was pretty surprised. And I told it that I have a spiritual practice. I chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, and it has really been transformative. It helps ground me, and so I can be happy, and it can help me, but I can't do that because it blocks everything I try to do. You know, like I fight with myself. I'm a musician, and I need to get certain things done, and I can create, but I can't kind of allow myself to be out in the world successfully, you know, because it's trying to protect me from the horrible, I'm worthless and whatever. Anyway, so that was a revelation. It understood that and what it needed from me was for me to follow through. It needs to trust me, which is kind of ironic because how can I follow through if I've always had this complete combative, you know, part of me that won't allow me to take, I seem to be quite ambitious, but I can't seem to do anything about it. Or I think that things are always just going to be horrible, you know? So that's what I need to do. Is I guess I need to somehow find that part to myself has to believe that things can change, you know, and see evidence of that. Anyways, I really thank you for this opportunity, because I at least know where that rage is coming from and why it's there.
Again, I'm so appreciative to everybody's disclosure, and wish we could hear from everybody else who's waiting, but as far as I can tell, I've got about 15 more minutes. Is that right, Scott?
You have about 25.
Oh, before the Q&A though.
Oh, before the Q&A. I'm sorry. You can use the time however you wish.
All right, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think I'm going to forego the video because these exercises are bringing us to very powerful places. So I'll do another exercise if you guys are okay with that. So yeah, so get comfortable. And this one is designed to, again, help you find key protectors. So take a second and think of somebody in your current or past life. I don't mean past life, but current or your past, who triggers you pretty consistently. And so if you're a therapist, it could be a client, or it could be a family member, work colleague, could be friend, could be politician. If you can't think of anybody, just think of the politician. And in your mind's eye, I'm going to invite you to put that person in a very contained room with a window. And you're outside the room looking at the person. And while you're watching, have the person do the thing that gets to you, and notice what happens in your body. Notice the parts that come in to protect you from this person and the impact they have on your body and your mind. So notice what's happening in your muscles, in your breathing, what happened to your heart when the protector jumped in. What kind of impulses are you having? Just trying to get a real felt sense of the impact of this protective part of you or parts on your body and on your mind. And then from this triggered place, look at the person through the window and notice how the person looks to you through the eyes of this part, this protector. And then tell this protector that you're not going to go into that room, so it's safe for it to stand down. And ask it to pull its energy out of you, out of your body and your mind, Just reassure it you're not going anywhere near that person right now. And that person can't see you or hurt you. And see if it's willing to separate. And if it is, you'll notice a palpable shift in your body and your mind. You'll notice the separation of that part. And you'll notice, and then notice what your body's like now without that part's influence. Notice your muscles and your breathing and your heart. And what impulses do you have now or not? And then look through these eyes at the person and see if the person looks different in any way. And if you, again, you're not going into that room, but if you were, how might you relate to the person now from this place? In contrast to how you would if the protector was there. And then turn your focus to the protector. I'm going to ask a very similar question that we did last exercise. What's it afraid would happen if it didn't jump up so big with this person? In other words, what's it protecting in there? And remind it how old you are. See how it reacts. And the last question, what does it need from you to trust that it's safe to let you handle this person or people like this person? What does it need from you to learn to trust you more? And when all that's complete, then again, thank the protector and let it know this isn't going to be your last exchange with it. You'll keep getting to know it. And then begin to shift your focus back outside. If it helps to do that, to take deep breaths, then take some deep breaths. So once again, I'd love a few reports about this one. So Steph.
Hi.
Hi.
So I thought of my niece, who came to live with me when she was 14. A brief background: we were both trafficked as children by my parents, and so when I am around her, sometimes her trauma triggers mine.
Sure.
And so what I saw, interestingly, when you said to choose a room, to put her in a room that has a window, the room that came to my mind was one where I was actually taken when Department of Health and Human Services took me for one brief interview and I had a chance to be free from my parents, but they actually put my parents on the other side of that window to watch that interview. And so I didn't feel safe in telling, but that's what came to mind. And that's where I put her, and I was on the other side of the window. And the protector part was when I asked the question, what are you protecting me from? Because what happened to me, the sensation was that disembodied feeling that you described earlier, like when she triggers me, that's what starts to happen, that really disembodied feeling, and experiencing my life from outside of my body. So when I asked what that was protecting me from, the answer was the memories, like the body memories of the trauma. She didn't know how old I was okay with that.
Did she separate from you?
Yeah. And the difference, like when I was able to have her separate, was when you asked the question, how would you interact differently with her? I was able to actually imagine myself going in the room and it not being dangerous, and being able to respond to her from a place of compassion for what she went through, rather than from a place of reactivity of what I've been through and what our shared experiences were.
That's great. Yeah, so you, in my language, you were able to access yourself when that protector stepped back. And automatically had compassion for her. So.
Yeah, and it didn't make me feel like I was in danger.
Right.
Of re-experiencing those body memories.
That's right.
So, yeah. I'm working with an IFS therapist right now, and we're doing that work of the body. I don't even know the words for it yet because we're really just starting on it, but it's the kind of trying to fix or reconnect with that disembodied feeling.
Good.
I have that a lot. So
yeah, it's a part. So you can honor that part too.
Yeah.
And again, thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm really sorry your parents did that to you and your niece.
I'm thankful for your work, because it resonates really deeply with me, because I actually do have DID. I was diagnosed with that. And what you said about how in a lot of circles with DID, they think of parts as disappearing, and that I've always hated that and never have liked that. And the IFS viewpoint on that. And I saw someone's question, they were asking about when someone has a hard time doing dialogue with their parts. And one thing that I learned, I think through with an IFS therapist, was it was like this little mantra that said, all parts are welcome, all parts are good, all parts just need to be understood. And when you have a part that you don't like, or you have bad feelings towards, it usually means you don't understand their job, or, so taking the time to understand their job really changes that. And I've seen that to be really true. So I'm just grateful for that work.
Thank you so much, Steph.
Mhm.
I think Laura Phoenix was next.
Thank you. Sorry, it took me a minute to unmute. Um, that was kind of interesting because to me, because in the previous exercise, I felt actually quite comfortable with that protector part. And in this case, I felt a really clear bind as soon as you sort of cued us that there was the protector part, and then there was the hurt that it was not actually effectively protecting me from. So I felt really like overwhelmed.
By
And
the
that was
hurt?
pretty intense for me.
Overwhelmed by the hurt?
Yeah, and then the sense of like powerlessness that this protective part I think of as fairly effective and strong. I mean, like we're talking about my mother, so no big surprise, I suppose, that like what am I going to do? Destroy her, you know?
Yeah.
It felt like it had nothing useful to do.
It felt what, did you say?
It felt like it had nothing useful to do. It was just something that was inhibited, and that took a lot of energy to inhibit. I think that was another thing I noted that was significant.
Yeah. Okay, and how did it affect your body? Could you tell?
I was shaking and very clenched, very braced. I could feel a lot of pressure in my face. Like there was a lot going on in my body.
Yeah. And was it willing to separate then at the end?
Yeah, I was able to, that was able to calm down fairly readily. And then I was left with quite a bit of hurt, which is hard to be with, but there it is.
Yeah. So that's the exile that it was protecting. And these exiles are hard to be with, but you know, with somebody's help, you can be with them and help them.
Mm-hmm.
So
Thank you.
thank you. So maybe we have time for one or two more. So I think maybe Anna.
Cardozo?
Yeah.
Oh, hi. um, I found out a year and a half ago that I had been dissociated for 38 years and I didn't know about it. When we were doing the exercise and the part about focusing, I thought about my mother in the room. And when you mentioned focusing on the body, I realized I could feel immense fear, anxiety, and being very unsettled. And then when you mentioned looking at my mom from this triggered part, it was pretty scary, I have to say. She alternated images like the devil. You know, her eyes were red. She looked at me. She changed form. It was actually very surprising to me to understand that I could be in such a place of such clear fear. And then I noticed that when I start talking to the protector, it is very difficult. I believe there's probably a lot of interference because I hear a lot of voices coming up at the same time, and there's a lot of confusion, and it becomes very bizarre. And then you mentioned something like, okay, so if you will notice a noticeable shift in your body if that separation happens, or if the protector steps back. And I did feel a sense of calmness, but I could not tell if it was, because you were suggesting it, or if that was really happening. I could not really tell. But when it came to the part of asking the part, how old does it think it is? 3 came to my mind. And I think I've tried to do a few of these exercises before, and I could never really communicate with the parts, but the 3 came, very vividly. So, yeah, that's what came up for me.
Thank you too, Anna. And I get that it was challenging, so I appreciate your willingness to try it.
Thank you.
Uh, yeah, so Lotus.
Okay, there you go. Hi, how are you?
Good.
Thank you so much for these sessions. They're really helpful. I put my partner in that box, say my ex-partner. There was a lot of gaslighting, so a lot of confusion when looking outside. I was the protective side looking at him, just confused, like, why are you behaving that way, or this idea of why can there just be truth in it? And yet my protective side, as I kept looking at him, I felt really sorry for him. And I'm not sure if that's a genuine feeling or it's the feeling that that was created as the gaslighting happened. So that's the part where the protective side is looking at him, but it's feeling sorry for him because he in himself is so alone and in so much pain for him to have done that to another person. And then when I asked myself, how old am I? It was 6 years old. And I believe that that's probably a lot of that stuff happened with my father, a lot of gaslighting. I'm assuming I'm connecting it to that. And when I asked, what is it that it wants to do? And it just wants to, it wants to play. It wants to have a good time. And let's see, when I asked it if I knew how old it was, it didn't. And when I let it know, when I let that part of me know that, I'm this age, it sort of even felt more compassionate towards him. So I guess I'm a bit confused in some way because there is fear, like looking at him from that young side of me, it's definitely, you could stay in there. Yeah. I'm okay with you being in there. Yet my protective side looking at him is, but look at him, he's so sad, right? And so that part of me is like, I want to play with him, but you're dangerous in some way.
Yeah.
And so that's
Lotus,
where I'm
that's
at.
a great description. Yeah, it's a great description of many clients that I've worked with who have trouble leaving abusive relationships because their exiles become very attached to the person and forgive all kinds of things because they see that person as their redeemer. And the protectors have to really lock them away. And what I find is if you can go to that little girl who's so attached to him and help her attach to you instead of him, then she doesn't need him in the same way. And it's a lot easier to deal with him.
If I may ask, the word redeem, what is that based on? Because I know I've heard that word and I've understood it in a sense of like the ignorance of.
No, it's more, most of these exiles have a feeling that they're not very valuable that they got in their own families.
Okay.
So they're looking, or they're very unsafe. And so they're looking for, in your case, Mr. Right, who can make them feel valuable and cared for, and also safe. And they become very attached to that particular person instead of to you. And so if
Okay.
you can become the primary caretaker of your own exiles, then they can let go of him.
Okay. Thank you. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
that.
I see we only have about 5 minutes left, Scott. What should we do?
Do you want to do one more, Sharon, or does that feel
No, if you
like
don't
not enough?
mind, we'll just stop in a minute, yeah.
Okay.
So Lydia,
I thank you so much for this exercise. I have 3 brothers, and one brother in particular triggers me to no end. And it's his sarcasm. He's sarcastic. He doesn't take anything I say seriously. He laughs at me. He thinks what I say is overly sensitive, over the top. And I get angry and mad. And so I went into this part of me and realized that I never felt that I had a voice. And so this protector is lashing out with this voice that's very loud and strong, but doesn't help our communication at all. And the most interesting part of this exercise for me was the protector saying to what the protector wants me to hear and needs me to understand is that I can trust my own voice. And not that I can have a voice, because there have been times when I do have a voice, but I can trust it and know that that's enough, regardless of how my brother responds. And that was very, very meaningful, that I can trust my own voice. So thank you so much.
you're welcome. And that's a translation of what I've been saying, that these parts start to trust you, yourself, as the leader who has a strong voice. And they don't have to jump in and scream at somebody because they now trust that you can handle this person. So yeah, I'm glad we use the time this way, because these reports are so potent and I think evocative for everybody. And I'm really, really grateful to everybody who shared. And yeah, this has been a wonderful experience. So I appreciate the invitation, Scott. And I don't know if you have any words that you want to end with, but
Yeah. Well, I want to first say thank you, Dr. Dick Schwartz, for your incredible offering and your generosity of spirit and compassion and your work. Thank you so much for that. And thank you all who attended live. I just want to really acknowledge those who shared, those who also shared in the chat box, and for all of your beautiful questions. Even though we didn't get to quite a few of them, we do acknowledge you for the questions and the beautiful support that came in as people shared. I think that was really quite beautiful. So thank you for that.